All right, these are your introductory notes for cells. So what is a cell? A cell is a chemical system that is able to maintain its structure and reproduce. Cells are the fundamental unit of life. Remember that if at any point in time I'm going too fast, you can always pause, rewind, slow me down, mute me, anything like that. A cell is a chemical system. There. All living things are cells or are composed of cells. Why are cells small? As cell size increases, the volume increases faster than the surface area. Cells obtain nutrients, gain information, and rid waste through their plasma membrane. So as cell size increases, a cell's ability to exchange with its environment becomes limited by the amount of membrane area that is available for exchange. Basically, what this is saying is, the bigger a cell gets, the harder it is to get information in, and the harder it is to get waste out. So, cells retain their small size. Here's an example. If the cell radius is 1 unit, so just a typical cell, this is not to scale, but this is a likeness of what happens if you make the cell 10 times larger. The surface area is 12.57 units, and the volume is only 4.1. So the surface area is 3 times larger in this ratio as the volume. That's really good. It means that no matter where you are in this cell, you can quickly get waste out, and you can quickly get information and nutrients in. The problem is, when you make the cell 10 times larger, these numbers change. This was 12.75, now it's 1257. This was 4.189, now it's 4,189. This number is 1,000 times larger. This number is only 100 times larger than it was, because when you work with surface area, you're squaring units. When you work with volume, you're cubing units. So now the problem becomes, if you have waste on the inside of this cell, it takes a long time for that waste to get expelled while more waste is continually building up. And if you want to get nutrients to the center of this cell, it takes a long time for diffusion and osmosis to get information and nutrients to the inside of that cell. It becomes too large and it wouldn't survive. So cells have to maintain their small size and just reproduce to create many cells in order for the cells to survive. So who saw cells first? A gentleman by the name of Robert Hooke in 1665. He was using an early compound microscope and viewed cork, like what they stop wine bottles up with. It's a tree, and saw many repeating box-like structures, and he called them cells. If you're the first one to see it, you usually get to name it, so the name cell has took or stayed. What he saw were spaces surrounded by walls that once contained living cells. Plant cells have a special thing called a cell wall that helps them retain their shape. Even when the cells die, the cell wall remains. So he was looking at dead plant cells that still had a cell wall. This is basically what he looked like. A whole host of cubes all stacked next to each other. The reason he called them cells is because they looked a little like what we refer to as jail cells. Jail cells get their name for the same reason that these cells did. They're small components that are all built up together. So that's kind of what Robert Hooke saw when he looked under the microscope at cork. The last thing we're going to talk about is what is true of cells and living organisms, and it is boiled down to be called cell theory. So the theory goes that cells are the fundamental unit of life. All organisms are constructed of and by cells. All cells arise from pre-existing cells. No cells are being spontaneously made. They are all being created because of other cells that are dividing. Cells are the functional units of life, which means all biochemical processes are carried out by cells. Groups of cells can be organized and function as multicellular organisms like us. And cells of multicellular organisms can become specialized in form and function to carry out sub-processes of the multicellular organisms. What this means is that our nerve cells look different and function different than our blood cells. Because their jobs are so distinct, those cells have been made to look different because they function different. Those are the notes on cells. Comment if you have any questions.